Hi everyone, we're here today with Craig Emmerich, and we're going to be talking about his new book, the Carnivore Cookbook. I've got it here with me. Congratulations, Craig.
Thank you.
To our YouTube channel.
Thank you.
So if you don't know about Craig, he wrote the best-selling book called Keto, and it's a very science-based book all about the ketogenic diet, and that's a really good one if you haven't checked that out. And then this one I've been reading now, and it's just, I was mesmerized. Of course, that's my very intense area of interest, but it was very well done and very easy to read. A lot of easy charts and things in the front, and there's meal plans and all kinds of stuff. So I'm really excited that this is out because I think it's kind of the stage for people to understand the carnivore diet and to overcome some of those common misconceptions that, maybe we're going to die if we don't have vitamins, something like that. So I'm just really excited about reading it and sharing it with people, and I'm just so happy that you took the time to talk to us today, Craig. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to make sure this book kind of didn't do a real deep dive in a lot of different areas, but really kind of covered a lot of the bases of, like you said, nutrients in your food, where they really come from, what does bioavailable nutrients look like, how our gut microbiome, all these things that are kind of critiques of eating this way, kind of breaking those down bit by bit and really showing the evidence that this can be very healing. And I know your journey has been the same as, I was keto for, 16, 17 years and thriving. And then about 6, 7 years ago, I started getting this chronic pain and I found out I had Lyme disease. And so the last 2 years, I've been primarily carnivore, and it's helped a ton, even from keto, with my Lyme pain. And I think that's something, there's people like Sean Baker and those people out there that are doing this for performance. There's this whole other aspect of carnivore for healing that I think is really important to get out there.
Yeah, I think some people don't realize because I think to do this, you have to have a strong why, because it's very counterculture, especially with all the vegan stuff every single day. So you have to have a really strong why and for healing yourself. And if you try anything else, then, I think this is a great next step for you. And so tell us a little bit more about the Lyme and how did you realize that, and just a little more background.
Yeah, so like I said, about 7, 8 years ago, I started getting this pain in my lower back. And right around the same time we were building this new house in the woods, where it's very heavily wooded, lots of ticks around and that kind of stuff. And so what happened was I initially thought that it was due to a back injury I got in high school, because I have this low back pain from a damaged disc. So I didn't think anything of it, and it just got worse, and it went up my back and then into my shoulders and into my neck, this constant kind of stiffness, soreness, and pain. And finally, it just got to a point where I said, there's something wrong here. I got to figure out what's going on here, because this is not right for somebody my age to feel like this. And I got a bunch of tests done, including a standard Western blot Lyme test, which I now know can be up to like 70% of the time false negative. So you get a negative, even though you really do have Lyme. And that's what I got, as a negative, because I really thought this seemed like Lyme. So I'm like, okay, well, what is it? I spent another year just trying to figure out what the heck this was. And finally, I went into a functional doctor that we know, and I said, look, here's all the blood tests I want to get done. I got to figure this out. And pretty much everything came back fine, except for 2 things. My hemoglobin was low. I had low red blood cell count, even though I ate tons of red meat and all this, and then the second thing was C-reactive protein. That's your inflammation marker. With our clients, we always say, try to get below 2, below 1's even better. Mine was 50. And so I immediately knew, wow, there's something really in chronic inflammation. There's something really going on in my body.
Infection or something.
Yeah, something bad going on. And so I right about the same time, our publisher, he contacted me and said, I really think you do have Lyme. You need to get this IGeneX test, which is much better at diagnosing whether you have Lyme or not. And sure enough, that came back positive. So I spent probably the next, 2 years since, just doing everything I can to fight it. And of everything I've done, everything from traditional medicine and antibiotics to, tinctures and all of these protocols, going carnivore provided the most relief of anything.
How did you hear about it in the first place?
Carnivore? Well, I would say Maria and I were pretty close to carnivore adjacent, for a while. We been keto for so long, we just kind of migrate to things that we like. And a lot of times, that's just for me, it's a burger. Maybe sometimes it have grilled onions on it, but that's about it. So we were pretty close already, and just taking out those last bits of, occasional salad or whatever that I had with it really did help.
Wow, that's awesome. So, what do you think is special about your approach in the book? Or did you make some special tweaks? Do you feel like you added some things to the ideas that are already out there?
Well, I think in the front section, some of these ideas are out there about our ancestors and what they really ate. Looking at the nitrogen content of their collagen. There's a bunch of studies on this. I know Dr. Michael Eads actually just did a presentation going even deeper into this subject about looking at what our ancestors really ate. And if you look at it, it's primarily meat. They primarily ate large herbivores like woolly mammoths and these things. And tying those all together, it makes a really compelling story about what our bodies are really designed to eat. You look at it from an ancestral approach, and they largely ate big herbivores like the larger rhinos, woolly mammoths, and those kind of things. And then you take it a step further, say, okay, what's our digestive system look like? And you compare us to other primates. We have a much longer small intestine. What's a small intestine great for? Processing meat. We have a much smaller colon or large bowel. What's that good for? Processing plant matter. It's like a third as long as other primates. We have almost no cecum left. Cecum is where we ferment plant, fibers basically, and turn them into saturated fatty acids in animals that are really, herbivores. We can't process protein anymore because we have such a small cecum, and so that goes right through us. Then you take it another step further and you look at your stomach pH. If you look at animals as in general, they fall into different groups. Animals that just eat plants, they have about a 5 to 6 stomach pH. Below 7 pH means more acidic, the lower you go. 5 to 6 for plant eaters. For animals that eat both, go back and forth, it's usually about around 4. If you look at carnivores, like lions and things that are known carnivores, it's usually around 2 to 3. If you look at scavengers, things that eat meat that's turning and then eat even more acidic stomach, like hyenas, they're like 1.5. What's a human's stomach pH? 1.5 to 2, typically around 1.5. So we kind of fall almost more even beyond carnivore into scavenger group. And now take that back to our ancestors. They ate woolly mammoths primarily. That's a massive animal. I mean, you or I could probably last a whole year off of one cow, right? So you kill this massive woolly mammoth, that whole tribe is eating off of that for months. And they don't have freezers, so it's the meat starting to turn. They have this very acidic stomach to handle this meat while it's turning. It all kind of links together and makes a lot of sense about what our bodies are primarily designed to eat.
Wow, that's fascinating because, nowadays it's like if the meat is one day over the supermarket, you're like, I'm going to throw it away.
Yeah, exactly. But, our bodies are designed to handle it well from an evolutionary standpoint.
I believe it. I mean, so I know you guys have coaching people on carnivore. So what are some of the pitfalls you see, or what are some of the mistakes people into at the beginning?
Yeah, and this kind of comes back to the why, like you said, and we wanted to point that out in the book too. What's your why? Because that's really important. It really kind of we kind of designed it as two different protocols based on what your why is. If your why is just, I want to see if it can lose some weight or, maybe general health, then you kind of take a different path and a different protocol for doing carnivore because you might be able to be more flexible and those kind of things. If it's healing like chronic pain, Lyme disease, bipolar disease, some of these things that people have used carnivore for successfully, you might have to be more strict. And we defined what's called the carnivore autoimmune protocol in the book, where you kind of step through these different levels of carnivore to kind of find what foods work for you and what trigger you. So it's kind of an ultimate elimination diet in that way. And so it really depends on your why. And in either case, there's a little different things that can happen. One thing was with weight loss. I wanted to point out, and I put a whole section in the book about body recomposition, because this is such a huge thing for people that, if the scale doesn't move or maybe the scale goes up a pound, I'm failing. And the problem is a lot of, especially women, it's very common for them to undereat protein. And so when you get enough protein eating carnivore, suddenly your body's got these, amino acids, the substrate to start rebuilding more lean mass than it's been for years. And the scale might go up a little bit. But if you do measurements, measure your body and see the recomposition that's happening that way, that should be your goal, not, we have a picture of Ted Neiman in the book of Ted was a vegetarian for like 4 years, and there's a photo of him there. And then we primarily meat eating based keto, his after photo, and he's the same weight in both photos. And you wouldn't believe it because he looks totally ripped now and he looks nothing like it before, but he's the same weight. So weight shouldn't be the indicator of success.
I feel like, especially for women, they're going to be so much more focused on the scale, and it's absolutely a good idea to stay away from the scale for at least a month or two when you're starting carnivore, because there's so many changes. And I think if you focus on the non-scale victories, like the way your clothes are fitting and just looking at your skin and your hair and your nails and your eyes, and everything's going to change. And if you just give it a little bit of time before you give up, I just feel like people are missing the best parts if they just focus on that scale.
Yeah, and then a couple other things is if you're coming from like a standard American diet, you're gonna have a little bit more of a transition than say coming from keto. So we talked about that too. If coming from standard American diet, then you got some of the same kind of keto things of keeping your electrolytes up and make sure you don't get dehydrated because of carbohydrates retain water. When you omit the carbohydrates, you leach out that extra retained water, which is a good thing, but electrolytes go with it. So there's kind of those same concerns. Going another step further, even coming from carnivore or keto, a lot of people who undereat protein, when they come here, their bodies can take a little bit of time to adjust to the added protein. And so they're adding like an HCl, hydrochloric acid for helping with stomach acid, and maybe a digestive enzyme after the meal can really help if you've got diarrhea or issues initially until the body can adjust to the added meat.
Yeah, and the fat too. They sometimes they're running to the bathroom because they're not used to. I didn't have a problem with electrolytes on keto. I mean, I didn't really have to pay that much attention to them, but this one I have to be so good about my electrolytes. I mean, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and I mean, if I take the electrolytes, I will sleep all night. But if I don't, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, great, I forgot my salt, So it is, and even it's been 16 months now and it's still the same. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm never gonna adjust.
Well, yeah, and it's something that's kind of individual in that way, like you said. Like we tell people to kind of shoot for about 2.5 teaspoons of salt a day, which is about 5 grams sodium, which works for most people. But then there's other people that need more. Some can get away with less. Dave Feldman, he eats a lot of, very close to carnivore most of the time. And I see him at events, and he coats his steak with, it looks like it's white with salt because he finds about 10 grams of sodium he feels is best. And
Oh, wow.
him putting that much salt on, he was salting to taste, and that still tasted not too salty for him. So that's maybe a
Oh,
good
wow.
way to look at it is keep adding the salt until it starts to taste too salty. And then, that's your kind of threshold and see if that is enough.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to mess up my food, but
Oh, sure.
I take salt in capsules. I just fill little capsules with
Great way.
salt, and I take those because I enjoy salt water. Sister drinks lots of salt water, but I just can't. So I take little capsules all the time, and that helps.
Yeah, that can
Um,
be helpful too. And there's electrolytes you can, add for drinks like the Element, and that can help boost up that sodium.
yeah, there's lots of things you can do if you want to spend money. But
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't
Yeah,
want
cheap and easy. Yeah.
to. Yeah. So, what now? Everybody says, what about your fiber? You're gonna die without fiber. You're not gonna be able to poop without fiber.
Well, first anecdote I like to give on that is, breast milk has no fiber in it whatsoever, and babies typically have zero issues going number two. They go number
That's
two all the time. But we definitely don't find that other than again the adaptation period. You might get some diarrhea, or some people will even get constipation, and if they add the HCl and stuff, that helps it. Once their bodies adapt, then they're fine. I have 2 years, have had no issues going number two every day. We also, in the book, I try to take a little deeper dive into kind of the gut microbiome type things because that's kind of the underlying question they're also asking about fiber is, how are you going to feed your gut microbiome? And I found this study that I thought it's one of my favorite studies because, as you know, studies can be so subjective and who funded it and what were their methods. And a lot of these, you see a study about keto and it's like 100 grams of carbs, or, they did it for 2 weeks. And there's always these kind of, or
It's
there was
like
like soybean
like
oil and that was their keto version,
it's
right?
like two people,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
one or two people.
exactly. This was a randomized control trial, good methods. They used good food. So they took the standard American diet kind of people, randomized them into two groups. One group did just vegetarian, so plant-based entirely, and it was whole foods, plant-based. And then the other one was 100% carnivore, only animal-based, and it was all good, steak and eggs and good animal-based foods. And then they compared the gut microbiome of these people, and three really interesting things I thought came out of it is number one, your gut microbiome would change within 24 hours of that food hitting the gut drastically. Like you see this huge shift in the microbiome, and it's there's alpha diversity and beta diversity, which the alpha diversity is the number of types of bugs. So if you got this strain and this strain and this strain, the beta diversity is how much of each of those. So,
Okay.
if you've got a million of this kind and it goes up to 100 million, or, that's the change in beta diversity. Well, what this study found was both vegetarian and carnivore had the same gut bugs. Largely, there was no change in the types of bugs in their gut, but the amounts changed a lot of certain bugs. Well, that just tells me the bugs that are fed through a carnivore diet are going up in up in amounts. The ones that are fed with plant matter go down in amounts, and it makes a lot of sense. Your gut is adapting to what you're eating, and it adapts really quickly. The second thing that I thought was really interesting in the study is that they also looked at the gene expression, the genes responsible for vitamin biosynthesis. So this is synthesizing vitamins. With vegetarian, it didn't change at all. With carnivore, it went through the roof. So why is suddenly the body hugely ramping up the genes that are needed for synthesizing vitamins? Because you're being flooded with vitamins. And
Wow.
it's so contrary to what, the vegetarian view and all that, because number one, we put a lot of charts in the book about where the vitamins are coming from, and primarily it is animal protein. You get most of your vitamins and nutrients from the animal protein, and then on top of it, it's more bioavailable. There's this one really interesting study as well that showed oysters. Oysters are really high in zinc, great source of zinc. They tested the blood after eating them, after several hours of eating them, see how much zinc got into the blood. Just eating oysters, lots of zinc into the bloodstream. Eating oysters with black beans, about a third of the zinc gets into the blood. Eating oysters with corn tortillas, almost no zinc gets into the blood because of the anti-nutrients in these plants that leach onto these. They grab onto these, zinc and magnesium and calcium, and they leach them out of the body because your body detoxes anti-nutrients. It sends them out of the body. It doesn't want them. They latch on, they go out. You never get that absorbed into your body. So who cares if spinach is really high in calcium, if it's all locked up in oxalates and doesn't even get into the bloodstream? That's the thing, is the bioavailability is so important. And I think the body is showing us what is happening by ramping up vitamin biosynthesis when we eat only animal proteins.
That's crazy. I mean, people, you can tell that right away when people start eating carnivore. You can just see that they're absorbing so much more because they're just start glowing. And
exactly. Their skin, their complexion, everything is just, it's pretty amazing that the changes you feel when you really dive in and do it 100%.
And see, that's what I always thought was so great about paleo. It was like you're not eating all those anti-nutrients, but now we're finding out that there's so many anti-nutrients in vegetables that we didn't realize.
Exactly. And a lot of people that go to keto, they do a lot of the keto foods that end up being really high in things like oxalates. The almonds, almond flours, the nuts and seeds are very high in oxalates. Spinach and leafy greens are high, kale, high in oxalates. So these foods that, if you're not focusing on the protein and you're doing all that stuff and the keto baked goods and cupcakes with almond flour, you're getting all these oxalates. And that's why a lot of people that go keto and they maybe see some improvement, and with chronic disease or autoimmune issues, going carnivore, they really see a big improvement.
Well, right away when I started carnivore, I mean, my bloating, and because I was a big vegetable eater, like tons of broccoli and cauliflower, and that I didn't do a lot of almonds, but those vegetables they were ruining me. Like I thought you had to eat them, and so as soon as they went away, I just felt so much better, and my digestion just improved so much. So I think that I just want to get the word out for people that are killing themselves with all these, and it's so much work too. It's so much work and it's so much money. I mean, you could buy a ribeye for the cost of a head of broccoli, some places.
And the amount of nutrients you get from it is much, much more. And the one of the things we find a lot of people's why is just to simplify things. Like this makes it so simple. With keto, you got to track carbs and you got to track all these things. With one of the things in the book, I wanted to make it even simpler. If your why is just kind of weight loss and general health, we made these huge charts of all the different cuts of protein. So if your goal is weight loss, you just move up the chart. Pick the cuts with a little less fat, a little more protein. If you're trying to gain or maintain, move down the chart. And so that's really the only thing you have to do, because carbs are going to be very low naturally. You're going to get enough protein for your lean mass if all you're eating is protein. And then you still have that fat kind of as your dial that you move up or down. So you don't really have to track anything. Prep is super easy. You throw a steak or a burger on a grill and grill it for a few minutes and you're ready to eat with hardly any cleanup. So it really simplifies things.
I did lose weight right away, and I think that was mainly due to the reducing the anti-nutrients and reducing my inflammation.
Yeah.
But I mean, sure, I would always like to lose more, but I don't feel well when I eat lean meats. Like I feel weird and not full, and so I wonder what do you suggest for people like that?
Depends on the goal. Again, if you're comfortable, that's great. You know, eat to satiety. You know, if you, especially when you get close to maybe what your goal weight is, last 5 pounds or 10 pounds, that can get tough, you know, and you probably will have to experience some hunger because, you know, just the
So
way it is, you know, but, you know, it depends on your goals and what you're comfortable with.
yeah, how much you want to get there.
Yeah, how
How
much you want to push it. And again, you know, other things are huge factors like strength training and, you know, activity. So there's a lot of components to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think coming into it for me was all about reducing my autoimmune symptoms and helping my thyroid. So, and I mean, I think people should have a long-term approach and not do this just for a week or a month because you're not going to feel that good for the for the first month. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that we've always told people with keto as well as kind of look at it as a lifestyle, right? And you know, if you're also again back to the why, if your why is not autoimmune or chronic disease or issues like that, then you can maybe go back and forth between keto and carnivore, and that's fine too. But you know, look at it as you know, don't look at it as I'm going to do this for a couple weeks and lose some weight and then go back to standard American diet. I mean, it's kind of like Albert Einstein's famous quote of, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Going back to what made you sick and overweight is going to make you sick and overweight again. I mean, it's just the way it is. So you got to look at it as a lifestyle.
um, all right, well, who should switch from keto to carnivore, do you think?
A lot of people in our type of situations, you know, maybe chronic issues, autoimmune, Lyme, bipolar, they may see some relief with keto, but not totally. This might be the next step they take to see full relief from symptoms. Other people who, like you were saying, that you had keto, you still had bloating and discomfort and things like that. Maybe this is something you try. Um, or just you're curious about health and how you might feel. You know, there's a lot of people that just want to give it a try and see what I feel like, and they feel amazing. So, you know, it really depends on the why. But you know, like I said earlier, some people could even just do it to make life simple. We get busy, we throw steak on, it's done in 5 minutes, you know, 10 minutes, and you're eating, and it makes things really easy.
Yeah, and you know how when you come home from the airport or something and you don't have any food and you're like, oh, I have to go. But that never happens with carnivore. You have your whole freezer full of
Oh,
food and you never have to go buy like broccoli and all that stuff that
we have
you used to buy.
perishables. Yeah, we have two growing boys, so we actually have three freezers. They're stocked, so we always have food on hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there any other, I mean, the recipes in here are just so beautiful and everybody should, I mean, Maria is so talented with her um, innovative ideas, and I just love. I mean, there's samosas, like that's pretty cool. I mean, she has so many ideas that I never would have thought of. So definitely, you know, if I think of it, one of the big things people say is the boredom. They're afraid they're going to be bored, and it's like, well, if you open up your mind a little bit, you're going to find so many alternative options and trying. I mean, one thing I've learned about is like so many different cuts that I mean, I always ate a lot of meat, but
Yeah.
now, I mean, I've learned all these different cuts of steak and how to cook them and, you know, things that I never focused on before.
Yeah, I think that's why Marie and I make kind of a good team is, you know, I kind of focus on the science. I have an electrical engineering background, so I really dig into that stuff. And then Maria is just a whiz at creating innovative recipes. And so you know, I wrote that half of the book. She wrote the other half of all the recipes and the meal plans and everything. And so it works really well together. But yeah, she's a real innovator when it comes to those kind of things. One of the recipes, it's not quite carnivore, what we would define as kind of level 4, which is adding some spices and sauces that are maybe zero carb. Some people might call that zero carb. Back when our son Kai was a baby, and we just fed them what we ate, and they are thriving. But early on, we struggled to get eggs in him. We cooked him every which way. He would not eat eggs. And so Maria just started experimenting, and she took hard-boiled eggs, threw them in the blender, added some sweetener, added some cocoa powder, blending it up, put it in the fridge. The next morning, it's exactly like chocolate pudding. I mean, it's one of the best chocolate puddings you'll ever have, and it's made from hard-boiled eggs. And he loved it. So this was a way to get eggs into him, right? Yes. But a lot of times, a lot of her innovation comes from our own situation of trying to get our kids to eat certain things and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're so cute, and they're getting big now. They're growing.
Yes, they are. Growing like weeds. And that's an interesting story as well, as we adopted them when they were 1 and 2 years old. And a lot of people will look at keto, much less carnivore, and they don't eat strictly carnivore. They eat what I would call very low carb keto. They used to eat tomato sauces and like their lasagna and those kind of things. But they came to us at like 2% on the height and weight charts, barely registering. Nutrition in Ethiopia was not good. And we just started feeding them what we ate. Egg yolks, ground beef, we'd puree up different beef component, salmon, all this stuff, and they loved it. And within a year, they were 50% on the growth charts. And at 2 years, 75% on the growth charts. And they've been there ever since. And so protein and amino acids are what fuel growth, not carbs. There's this perception that kids will be stunted in growth when they don't have carbs. Well, those come from epilepsy studies where they were fed like 90% fat for epilepsy. And first of all, they have epilepsy, so they have those metabolic issues to begin with. And then on top of it, the diet they were giving these young kids was like 30, 40 grams of protein a day. Well, of course they're not going to grow, right? I mean, that's not comparing apples to oranges. But, this type of whole food diet is amazing for kids.
Absolutely. My sister has 2 little kids, and they're mostly, she always feeds them the meat and the eggs and that stuff first, and then maybe they can have a little fruit or something like that. But they're doing so well. And they don't get sick very much, and they're smart and everything. So it makes a big difference. I mean, if you want your kids to be well behaved, like, don't feed them a bunch of junk, It's like it's not rocket science. So I was going to ask you about what do you think about some of the, I've had somebody tell me, okay, this is this one that stumped me. So they had a metallic taste in their mouth after they did carnivore for like a week. And I couldn't figure out, I thought maybe they have like iron overload or something. Maybe they get tested for iron overload maybe or something. That was all I could think of.
You can get your ferritin levels checked, and some people their ferritin will run a bit high at first, and usually it levels out with time. And I think it's just the body adapting and changing. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I would maybe get a ferritin level checked if that happened. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, that was a new one for me. And so where would people, when they get the book, what should they do first? Like, where should they start?
Well, I think the front matter is really great for setting up your why, right? And understanding the history of this and the reason why you might want to do carnivore and why it might be good for your body. And so I think diving in the front and getting motivated that way can really help you. And then Maria makes it easy to stick to it because the recipes are so innovative, and we have meal plans too. If you just want to follow those, don't want to think about it, just do whatever the meal plan says. I think that's a great way to get going, especially with World Carnivore Month, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect time to start. What do you think for people who are saying, I'm afraid of what my doctor's going to say, or I'm afraid about cholesterol, things like that?
Yeah, so cholesterol is an interesting one too, very individual. Some people, we get tons of people who their cholesterol goes from bad to good as far as the traditional ranges, right? One thing that's for certain is, I mean, except for very outlying cases, triglycerides go way down. We've had people, in the 300s or higher on triglycerides come down into what would be considered optimal, below 100, maybe 75, within a matter of weeks. Huge improvements, HDL going up. So, we usually tell people to worry more about the triglyceride to HDL ratio, because that is a much better indicator anyway than total cholesterol or LDL. And so you look at that ratio and usually want to be 2 or less, ideally 1 or less, which means your HDL is higher than your triglycerides, or pretty close. And that usually happens. It's very rare that we don't see that happening. And usually it doesn't quite go that far in the right direction if you're not doing a whole foods kind of approach. We see people who, I'm carnivore and I'm drinking my bulletproof coffee every morning and, doing this, drinking these fatty coffees, which really can kind of mess up the triglycerides in some people. So that's not a healthy approach. Now you're taking away all those nutrients that you're getting from meat and replacing it with a liquid fat that's refined and has almost no nutrients in it. A little bit of vitamin E, and that's about it. So we definitely don't want you drinking those fatty coffees or anything like that. Stick with the whole foods, and most people do really well.
That's awesome. Okay, one more question. What about the vitamin C? When people are worried their teeth are gonna fall out or something.
Get scurvy. Yeah, so a couple things on that. First of all, carbohydrates are your vitamin C needs are directly correlated to the amount of carbohydrates you eat. Studies have shown this. The lower your carbohydrate intake, the less vitamin C you need to keep scurvy or issues like that away. So when you eat no carbohydrates, your need for vitamin C is very, very low. And secondly, our charts in the book show vitamin C in beef, because there is vitamin C in beef. You can find information out there that the FDA just decided to put 0 because they didn't think there was any C in, and they don't even test for vitamin C in beef. But there's been some studies on like goat and proteins like that where they show vitamin C in them. And of course, liver is quite high in vitamin C. So if you're eating liver, you get plenty of vitamin C. Secondly, sorry, go ahead.
Does it have to be raw or very lightly cooked?
Yeah, that's one thing with the vitamin C content in liver. Most of the nutrients are fine if you cook it or do different things with it. The vitamin C, the more raw it is, the better. So one way you can do that, if you're concerned about vitamin C or if you have some sort of issue, which I never really seen, but take liver and cut it into real small pieces, throw it in the freezer, and just pop it like a pill, and that way it's raw, you swallow it, you don't taste it, so you don't have any issues with it if you're averse to it. But another thing that is interesting is, so if you eat nose to tail, you're getting plenty of vitamin C for what you need because you have almost no carbs and you're getting vitamin C. There's also evidence that just eating steak, you're getting enough, because there's people out there like Charlene Anderson who one of the reasons she started doing carnivore 21 years ago was for her Lyme disease. She's been doing carnivore for 21 years, doesn't eat a lot of organ meat, so primarily steaks and muscle meat, and she looks amazing. She's 43 years old now, I think, been carnivore for 21 years, and she's thriving. No scurvy in sight. So, I think it's one of those traditional beliefs, kind of like you need all this fiber, or saturated fat's going to cause heart disease. We have so many of these beliefs that are just ingrained in us in our society that I think this diet puts a lot of those into question.
Well, and maybe it was the difference in having fresh meat rather than some kind of preserved meat, and maybe that makes a difference in that content.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, Craig. Well, I'm so impressed with the book. Everybody needs to go get one, and it's going to be great for your carnivore repertoire, your library. So you can order it on Amazon or get it at Barnes & Noble. So it's It's a great job. Another wonderful book from you guys. I'm always happy to get your books in the mail. So, well, thanks so much for talking with us, Craig. And make sure and follow Craig and Maria on social media. And anything else you want to, you tell them where to find you?
Yeah, we have a free blog, mariamindbodyhealth.com. And you can find us under Craig Emmerich or Maria Emmerich on social media. But thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.